Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about how to make a package. So I want to go through a couple of topics here. You will have a quiz on this, by the way, so make sure you watch this from start to finish. Um, Basically, we're going to be talking about story forms that you most likely will use this semester in Canyons News. I want to go through kind of the how to make a package. I'm going to show you a couple of examples. And I think hopefully this will give you a pretty good idea. Either one, if you're a return customer to my class, this will be a good refresher for you. And if you're brand new, definitely pay attention to this because I think this will be a critical element as we embark on the next 13 to 14 weeks, in which, along with assignment 0, you'll have 6 additional packages that you have to turn in, of course, by the end of the semester. So without further ado, what I want to do is call up this PowerPoint and get us started, and then go from there. So hopefully you see my PowerPoint. It looks like you do. So let's get started. So here are the 2 essential story forms you'll use in Canyons News. There is a third, which is called a VOSOT. That will probably be more easily explained, honestly, on production nights, or, as we progress this semester, I can kind of explain what a VOSOT is. But basically, the 2 that will probably show up the most in each show, quite honestly, will be either a VO, which stands for voiceover, or a package, which is longer. It's about 1:30 to 2 minutes, whereas the VO, 30 to 35 seconds in general. So let's talk about a VO first. Now, if you're a film major or have done film, you probably have heard the term voiceover. Well, it's different if it's in the broadcast environment. A voiceover in film is, for lack of a better way of saying this, like a movie trailer where you hear the, you click on YouTube, you look at the trailer of whatever the latest Spider-Man film is, and you've got somebody voicing it over with some music and, some exciting footage, et cetera, to get you into the mood for a movie. Well, the VO in a broadcast is a lot different. It's something that happens actually live during the actual newscast. And again, it's shorter. So anyway, what is a voiceover or a VO? It's any story that is read by the anchor and also incorporates video, a full screen graphic, or some other visual, meaning that the video could be anything from, breaking news event like an accident out of McBean, a brush fire. It could also mean a full screen graphic, like maybe a map, or maybe some bullet points of some sort of, safety tips on how to survive an earthquake or whatever. But the element is that it's read live by the anchor, with video actually being kind of placed as the anchor talks, as opposed to beforehand where a package is pre-produced. So it's an anchor's voice is heard over some other visual. It helps the producer vary the pace of the show. So, for example, when you only have a 30-minute show and you have maybe 16 to 18 minutes of that being actual content, where the rest of it being advertisement, you kind of have to mix it up. You can't have everybody in your newsroom doing a 1:30 to 2 minute package, because you wouldn't have enough time to fit all those stories in that actual show. So you need shorter elements in which to impart information, right? And it says 20 to 30 seconds, but in reality, VOs generally run 30 to 35. That's kind of a more realistic approach. The information for that VO can come from a number of sources. It can come from the photographer who's, let's say he was out covering a protest in the Honor Grove here at COC, brought it back and handed it to you. You look at it, you see what footage you have. Maybe he talked to a few people, and they tell you exactly when it happened and why they're out there, et cetera. And you just kind of get all the information that why that story is important. And you actually write a VO where we actually don't hear from anyone in the actual story. The only one you will hear is the anchor reading over the information, right? Or you can get it from a press release. We talked about the public information officers last week, talked about press releases. Well, they send out these releases, you send someone out to an event, and you have the release, later on with you, and you can actually write some things that, that happen that you have video of. For example, maybe there was a city council meeting where they were debating some kind of hot button topic, and you have various shots of the city council chambers and people in the crowd, et cetera. And just talk, and the obviously the council members at the desk, and you utilize a press release to kind of write about that story. So that VO can come from a number of different sources. One thing you have to remember when writing to video, whether it be in a VO or quite honestly a package or a VOSA, which you'll probably hear about at some point this semester, you have to remember that we're writing to what we see on the screen, okay, which is writing the video. So there's a couple of acronyms I want you to be familiar with. One is SWAP, which is synchronized words and pictures, versus NERTWITS. I know it's kind of a funny, little acronym there, but it stands for not related to what's in the script. So let me give you an example. So let's say hypothetically, you hear that there are huge lines for COVID testing, at COC. We know that there's COVID testing over, I believe, in Hasley, or I think that's where it was earlier this semester. And so you go over there with your camera and you get footage, and it turns out when you get over there that, there's only a couple of people in line, but still you need the video. So you go shoot it, you bring it back, and then you write a script that says, massive lines today at College of the Canyons as people are patiently awaiting to get tested for COVID so they can enter classrooms at COC. Well, if you're writing about massive lines at COC, but you're showing us two people in line in a COVID testing center, the two don't line up, right? So that's not writing to your video. That's actually NERTWITS. That's not related to what's in the script. So be aware of when you are writing and formulating your stories that, if you say it, let's see it as best you can, okay? That's what SWAP versus NERTWITS is. When we talk about a package, that involves reporters that are fully self-contained pieces. So for example, we watched that story on Vinyl last week with Mike Castellucci. That's considered a package, right? I'm going to, show you some other examples here as this lecture progresses, right? But the news package is a report produced and edited prior to broadcast time. So everything is done before the show starts, long before the show starts, hopefully. And so this semester, you guys are going to have an absolute deadline of when these stories are done. So you can't be putting a package together, literally as we start the show. It doesn't work that way. But what a package does consist of is a reporter's recorded voice or a voice track telling the story, pictures or video with accompanying natural sound to cover the narration, sound bites, which are excerpts of interviews that you go out and record, and a stand-up, which generally speaking winds up in the middle of the story. It's used as a transition from one aspect of the story to another. You can also close with a stand-up, and that's kind of like wrapping up the story or looking ahead. You cannot start a story with a stand-up. Never, ever start a story with a stand-up. So I want to share with you really quickly here the element. I'm going to stop sharing here, and we're going to go to the other desktop. And I want to show you basically a kind of a sort of sample way of what you should think about when putting a package together. By the way, this thing here is very cool. It's the Elements of Good News package. And I put this in your Canvas module. So if I actually go to your Canvas module here, under 225, you'll see all, of course, we've shown you this before, but you've seen all of this here, resources and grading rubrics. It's under here under how do you create a good package, okay? So here it is.
So, you want to make a news package. Well, there's more to it than just editing random video together. A package is a self-contained video element containing very specific things. We're going to use the resources and people here at the Orange Media Network at Oregon State University to show you how it's done.
It's all about telling a story. From the moment the camera's out of the bag, you're piecing it together. Part of it is your reporter track, your voice narrating the B-roll. Just make sure we see what you're talking about. If you mention a phone, Show that phone. It's say dog, see dog. Next, we should have sound bites.
Okay, what you're going to do is you're going to sit down with someone like me, and you're only going to use pieces of what I say.
We're not using the whole thing, just the parts we need to make our point.
All I want is short sound bites.
Your voice is the transition between bites. You explain, the sound bites give emotion.
That's all I really want is the emotion.
At some point in your story, you might want to do a stand-up where you're on camera bridging two parts of the piece. But you need to use it for more than just FaceTime. Demonstrate something. Show me something. For example, you can use a prop. Use your phone to show the viewer something interesting. Or you can set the tripod far away to try to show the size and scope of something. You can even set the camera on the ground and show things from a unique angle.
And your sounds are always important. Use nat pops. Natural sound brings a viewer in. And when you finally put everything away, make sure your story is told completely.
All right, so there's an example of a package, all right? I wanted you to see that. And again, you can find that under the first Canvas module. And what I might do is once this is all said and done, I might even put a copy of this YouTube lecture there as well, so that you can easily refer to it when you're doing your own thing. All right, well, let's get into the weeds, if you will. Good weeds, by the way. Setting up the story, right? So obviously we talked last week in person about what makes something newsworthy and the types of stories that you can tell, like enterprising a story, feature stories, or news stories, etc. Well, how do you set up the story? Because I get this question all the time. Gosh, Dave, how do you and Austin come up with news stories so often? Well, this is kind of what we look to, right? First of all, word of mouth, right? There's so many stories out there that people are talking about, or so many things that are interesting that people actually talk about. So part of your job as a aspiring journalist is to just learn how to listen, right? You might find that you're over at Starbucks and you overhear, the barista talking about how she's working 11 hours a day and, she's got 2 kids at home. She's a full-time student. Well, that might make an interesting story. How does someone maintain a life balance like that? Maybe she has something interesting that she's trying to aspire to be, right? That's one thing. Maybe if you're at a city council meeting, right? I think nothing, I know the city council meetings aren't sexy, but honestly, go sit into a city council meeting or tune into one. You can watch them live on Tuesday nights online and on SCB TV. And you can hear people talking about stories that concepts that you might be able to actually pick up on for a later story. There's obviously campus and local events. There's a campus calendar that's on the homepage of canyons.edu. There is a City of Santa Clarita calendar of events on their homepage at the City of Santa Clarita's website. There's, those are low-hanging fruit, but you can check other areas around us that are in our viewing area that might be doing something interesting. Those are ready to be made news stories, right? You can localize a national or regional story. I mean, like COVID-19 is, one story after another that you can localize, right? Maybe one being that I saw just the other day about how Dr. Anthony Fauci is talking about us getting a 4th COVID shot, right? Another booster shot. Well, that would be interesting in that maybe you should talk to some health professionals or folks down at the hospital, doctors, and ask them if that's a good idea, or if, are we doing these things too frequently so that, they don't work as well. I don't know. I'm not a scientist, nor am I a doctor. That's our job to talk to experts to tell us if that's the case, right? Maybe there's a story about someone that's really struggled with remote learning and is back on campus and, wants to talk about the differences, right? I know I have Afghanistan reacts up there, but let's exchange that out for Ukraine, right? Russia's in the middle of invading Ukraine right now. I guarantee you that you could probably call the International Studies Department and find out if someone is on campus, either on the faculty or, is going to school here that might have some Ukraine connections, right? Find out what they're thinking, because they might have family members back in the Ukraine that are, facing a really facing a war, right? Or maybe here in Santa Clarita, you never know. Earthquake preparedness, always, earthquakes are always something to localize, because we get earthquakes. Are people ready for the next big one, right? Brush fire preparedness is another popular thing we often do, right? So there's things that you can localize. If there's a big political story, a big Supreme Court ruling, you can, we have election stuff. When that comes up, you can localize election coverage. You can spotlight a person, place, or organization. There is nonstop people in the community that are interesting. You can find them on social media. Maybe you see them on the street. Maybe there's a guy that's doing a creative like sign spinning thing. Maybe talk to him, see what his deal is or her deal is, right? Maybe there's an interesting place in town, right? A good hiking trail. What do people think of that, right? An organization, whatever it might be. What else can you create? Be creative. Think about how you can do storytelling that might be interesting. And of course, you can always bounce ideas off Austin and I. You're in our two, quote unquote, executive producer interns in the class in Jeremy and Cade. All right. Who are your main characters? Once you've set up the story, once you've picked a story, who is it? Who are your main characters? Who's the organizer, the spokesman, the eyewitness? Who is it who are the people that are going to be able to best tell you, best explain what the story is about? If it's not a breaking news event or a future news event, chat with the potential interview subject, confirm they're willing and able to participate. I can't tell you how many times somebody sets up a story, they agree to meet these people out of the story, and then all of a sudden someone pulls the plug on it. Make sure that you are in contact with the people that you want to talk to, or at least one of the main players in it, because they may say, oh my gosh, you know what? I know I was supposed to meet you at 1 o'clock, but I might not be able to make it, but you can talk to this person. Take good notes. If you contact someone and they don't seem like the best fit, ask them to give you suggestions about who else to reach out to, right? That's always a good idea. Just do your homework, be thorough. Okay, questions to think about. What's your big idea? What are you doing out there, right? So if you're doing a story on, people that show up to clean like hiking trails at the Placerita Nature Center once a month, well, how do you plan on making that story interesting, right? Do you want to focus on just one person that's always showing up there every month, and focus on what brings him or her to the table? Do you want to talk about the group in general? What's your idea? If your audience only learns one thing from your story, what would it be? Is this a story, right? I can't tell you how many times we've had people say, well, I thought this would be good. And then if you start thinking about it, think about it comprehensively. Can you tell it visually? Is it interesting? Can you get the right people to talk to you? Do you have time to do it, right? Can you pull it off? Can you make a beginning, middle, and end? How about the weather? Are you going to be able to, if you're shooting outdoors, will you be able to pull it off, right? So, for example, Matt Frade, I hate to throw Matt under the bus because it really wasn't his fault, but I think last fall, Matt, if I recall, you were trying to do a story with, or may have been last spring, I can't remember, they all run together now, but you were trying to do a story with the cross-country runner who, it was last fall, who was, a champion for COC. The problem was when you went up to go interview her, it was like the weather was terrible. And so you had to wind up thinking of some other thing to do, which you did great, but be careful, okay? Is it visual? Clearly, you got to make sure you think visually about the story. If you can't tell the story visually with a lot of B-roll, is there at least some other stuff that you can add in that would make you be able to visually tell the story? So how can you make a topic that's clearly newsworthy into a compelling visual piece? So if you're doing a story on the Ukraine invasion and how it might be affecting someone here locally, clearly you're not going to have a lot of video to work with here, but you might be able to do it, by turning to CNN or some other news organization on YouTube and using some of that footage. Do your research when you're interviewing somebody, okay? Before you get to the shoot, if you have the opportunity, study up on the subject, not just the person, but what it is you're talking about. So if you're doing a story on, I don't know, let's say you're doing a story on, I just learned today, for example, that the Heart District stopped using Crisis Go. They're not having students fill out any kind of like whatever, the app that basically says that you don't have COVID before you come to campus. Well, see if any other school districts are doing. If you were doing that story, see if any other school districts are doing the same thing. Is Hart one of the first to be doing this? Is Hart behind the curve? I think that's easily researchable by simply going on Google, right? Do some research on who you want to talk to, right? So if you're doing a feature story on Dave Caldwell, the public information officer at the Hart District, Google Dave Caldwell and see what else is out there on him. If you're doing a story on an athlete, Google and see if anyone else has done anything on the athlete. Find out some interesting find out some interesting things. They all have, usually bios from sports departments that talk about their background, their hobbies, etc. Make sure you have a mic, okay? Always here, stick mic, right? XLR cable, stick mic, XLR cable, a light if you're going to be indoors or you're going to shoot at night. Always bring a camera light, okay? Nothing sucks more than having a great interview, but you can't see the person on the screen. Avoid yes or no questions, okay? Ask probing questions. Ask questions like why, as opposed to, are you this, are you that? That's a yes or no question. You want people to expand on their thoughts. So asking that question with a why makes it a lot easier. Have an idea of what you want to hear, but let the conversation flow and listen. Okay, and listen, I should say, meaning have an idea of what you want to, what you want to ask, right? What you're looking for, but don't be married to your questions. Let it be conversation, right? Get into a conversation with somebody, and it's much more free flowing, but listen carefully, because a lot of times people will say things, answers, and you can build another question off their answer. So don't be married to those notes, just have them. After you finish shooting your interview, it's time to collect some B-roll. Shoot video of the interviewee and subject matter that visually connects to your idea, right? So if you're talking to, you're talking about whether, our newer district attorney, George Gascon, whether his policies are good for LA County or not so good, and you're talking to Larry Alvarez, an administrative justice, let's say the story is about whether, it's been tough to recruit people to his program because they feel like if they go into law enforcement, they'll be, they might be demonized, right? When you sit down with Larry, after you're done talking to him, get some coverage shots of him. After he's done talking to you, get him working in his computer, maybe teaching class, whatever, so that you can have setup shots for people that you talk to. No video, can the interviewee provide still photos or video, right? So Kevin, what's Kevin's last name? Oh gosh, Kevin Anthony, there we go. Kevin Anthony, who's our hotel management guy, he might have just retired, but at one point we interviewed him about climbing one of the tallest mountains on planet Earth in Africa. And of course, you're not gonna be able to go to Africa to be there as he climbs the mountain, but certainly he had lots of still photos of him climbing the mountain. So he talked about his experience of climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. He had a lot of photographs. I think he actually had some video too that he had taken. You have access to that. You just need to ask for it. Maybe there's stuff on social media that you can use, right? Is there any archival footage to be found on YouTube? You can access with permission or courtesy, the exception of the Olympics, and of course, a lot of the major sporting leagues. Just check with me or Austin. Canyons News Google Drive with stock footage might be of help, right? So we have some stock footage of people with vaccines and fires and other breaking news events. That's an Austin thing. So be sure you confer with him if you need help, or just talk to us, because sometimes we actually have archive footage from previous stories on Canyons News that might relate to what you're doing in the present day. All right. After you finished acquiring your A roll, that's your interviews, and your B roll, which is your video, what do you do now? Okay. Well, I always think it's a good idea to transcribe or sort video you record and become familiar with what A roll and B roll you have. Now, one of the coolest things, and I don't have it like right in front of me right now, but ask me about a free service that you can download where it will actually transcribe the interview for you and put it in on paper for you. That way you can see everything that your people have said on that actual like interview, and it'll make it really easy to build a story, right? Keep track of the B-roll you have, okay? Know what you have so that when you sit down, you can construct something on paper before you put it together in principle, right? Highlight your best sound bites. Write down what you decide are the best. Remember, in a minute 30 or minute 45 or a 2-minute package, because you're going to have some of that taken up by your own voice track, your own storytelling, you're literally looking at maybe 4 different sound bites that total somewhere between 45 seconds and a minute total. So you have to really be judicious in what you want to use versus what part of that interview you're going to use just to help build your story, but you maybe have to paraphrase things, right? Identify your story's beginning, middle, and end. What is the best way to start your story? Okay, I always think Nat Sound is the way to go. I think in that video I just showed you, he called it a quote unquote full Nat pop. But for example, if you're doing a story on, you know, somebody rebuilding a house that's been burned from a fire, and you go over there and, you know, the contractor's over there banging with a hammer, right? Nails on the, you know, to start rebuilding the house. Start with that, right? Grab my attention, bring me into the story visually and with audio, right? Close up the hammer on the nail. Really cool way to start. Think about the videos you watch online. How do they capture your attention? If you want to watch one of the cooler things that you can do, go to YouTube, go to and search N as in Nancy, PPA. That's the National Press Photographers Association. They have a YouTube channel, MPPA. There's all sorts of really, really cool story examples on that website. You can see how they balance Nat Sound versus voice track versus how long they spend on sound bites, right? Which shouldn't be any more than 15 seconds anyway, right? I always say, if you study what other people do, particularly professionals like Mike Castellucci or Boyd Hubert, you can go a long way, right? Think about what those videos that you watch, how do they capture your attention? What is the key? So write your story that will include a balance of your voice track and sound bites you highlighted earlier. I'm going to give you a fair warning that students oftentimes will write 1 or 2 bits of voice track and then throw in like a minute's worth of sound all back to back to back to back. And then you hear their voice come back on and say, and I'm so-and-so for Canyons News. That is not going to work. You will get a low grade for that. You have to have a balance between your voice track, the sound bite, your voice track, the sound bite. Okay. Critical, critical, critical that you remember that. Please avoid shaky and excessive movement in video. Okay. Always. So don't move that camera. Keep it steady. And obviously I've said use a tripod. And when you don't use a tripod, find a solid surface in which to put the camera on. I don't want to see it out here in front of you shaking the whole time. Don't zoom. Do not zoom. Do not pan. Steady, composed shots. Let's get used to that. Always monitor and balance your audio levels for both interviews and voice track. Again, primary audio, A-roll audio, -12. B-roll, ambient sound, -24-ish. You'll figure it out as you're listening in your headphones. You don't want to have the ambient sound be so loud that it distracts from the actual primary sound. Remember, channel 1, input 1, left side. That is shotgun, that's ambient. Input 2, channel 2, right side, stick mic, A-roll sound, okay? Don't be obvious, right? Oh, think about opportunities for Nat Sound, right? Make sure that when you're shooting video that you're looking for good opportunities where we get into the story. You can hear the typing on the, you know, little fake story there. You can hear the bag zipping up. There's opportunities everywhere for full Nat Sound. Don't be obvious when writing into sound bites, by the way. I don't want to hear we spoke to. So for example, if you were doing a story on, you know, busy lines that are, you know, overflowing lines at, you know, at the COVID testing site, and somebody says to you, man, I'm telling you this, having to stand here day after day, trying to get tested is just overwhelming and frustrating, right? That's what your person says. And leading into that, you say, the COVID lines are long. Many people are frustrated and overwhelmed. And then your person says, yeah, I'm frustrated and overwhelmed. You're a parrot. Don't repeat what they say. Set it up so that whatever you say, they kind of add to your voice track and you don't repeat each other. So when I show you Bobby Block's story here in just a minute, listen to how he writes into sound and know that he never repeats, they never repeat what he says. Remember SWAP and NerdTwits, synchronized words and pictures, of course, versus not related to what's in the script, right to your video. Finally, front pad and back pad, easily explained when at the very, very start of your story, we should not hear your primary audio until about 3/4 of a second or a second into the video, okay? So the video is from the very start, but 3/4 of a second or a second in, start your primary audio. When you finish the story and say your obligatory out cue, I'm Joe Smith for Canyons News, do not cut the video off right after you say Canyons News. Let the video trail off for 3 or 4 seconds so we have some pad. Trust me when I tell you, if you're directing or technical directing on a live show, you'll appreciate what back pad is, and we'll probably yell at you in the future about it again. All right, now it's time to edit. Lay down your A-roll first. Your A-roll is your voice and sound bites, okay? That's your voice track and your sound bites. Okay, now what you're going to see, and we'll obviously show this to you kind of in sort of a workshop form on the Wednesday, the 23rd. That would be tomorrow when I'm recording this, or if you watch this after tomorrow, it was yesterday or the day before. You're going to want to you're going to want to lay down your A-roll, which is your voice and sound bites first. Then you're going to go back and fill in your B-roll to visually and match your audio and cover where you need to cover so that there's no what's called jump cuts. And I'll explain that. Jump cuts are basically where, if you show someone walking into the room and then all of a sudden they're sitting and you don't have anything in between, like a cutaway, they're going to look like they magically go from here to here, and that's not good. That's called a jump cut. Pay attention to sound and match levels. I'll continue to hammer that home. Again, everything should be even, -12 for all your A-roll, -24 or so for your B-roll. Get feedback from me or Austin, or ask a classmate after you've cut, your story. Find out what they think about it, and leave yourself plenty of time to get feedback so that you're not rushing to get it done right at deadline, because then you don't have time for it. You don't have time for feedback. It is critical to open yourself up for criticism. It is critical for you to lean on a classmate or a mentor to look at your work before you finish it, okay? Export and upload your story to the class folder on Google Drive. We will show you that on Wednesday, the 23rd. So hopefully you're all here for that. We also have some folks in the class that can help you with that should you have questions beyond the 23rd, all right, which I'm sure you will. And the digital team, which is a small team that we will be in place on show nights, will be sharing your stories on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, or we might have you do it. We're still kind of a work in progress on that. In any event, everything's going to go up to our Canyons News social media pages, and then you can share it from there. Don't directly upload it to your personal account. You want to share it from the professional account to your personal account. All right, I want to show you, there's a link here that if you click on Canvas, it's going to take you to this page here. Okay. And this is sample packages right here. Okay. Oh, sorry, you guys can't see it. Now you should be able to see it. Okay. I assume you can see this. In fact, I'm going to stop sharing one more time just in case, because I can't tell. Let's go to desktop too. You should be able to see it now. Okay, so we're over on the desktop. And if you click on these sample packages, there's a number of different packages you can look at. And these are all really good stories from former students. I want to show you Tommy's Troubles because it really does do a good job of effectively balancing Bobby's storytelling with excerpts of sound, with Nat sound, and he really creates what I think is a collage of amazing work here. And just so you know, he found out about this story about noon the day it happened. We got a phone call. He raced over there, came back, and had this story put together within just a couple hours. So here we go.
Gridlock in the parking lot. Cars lined up at Tommy's Hamburgers in Santa Clarita for a promotional deal celebrating the burger chain's 73rd anniversary. Guests put up with hour-long wait times for the chance to order hamburgers at a special 73-cent price. But sometimes the best deals can bring out the worst in people.
You keep your camera out here long enough, you may get a fight after I leave.
Tight spaces in the long wait cause tempers to flare.
Why don't you go to the back of the line? Why don't you go to the back of the line? Why are you disrespectful to people?
It was a sight that left some customers in disbelief.
You know what? Honestly, this is the first time that I've actually seen, like, gone crazy like this.
But out of the chaos, one man stepped forward to de-escalate the situation.
I've been 32 years in security and it kicked in. I don't want to see people fight out in a parking lot in front of families and out here for a burger.
Off-duty security officer Dennis Jarvis took it upon himself to direct traffic and break up fights.
But no one wants to give here. If there's no one out here controlling this, no one wants to give an inch to have someone park, and it's crazy.
The heated atmosphere left some questioning if it was all worth it.
You know, things like this ain't worth it, but still, I mean, who can beat a deal, right?
But in spite of the conflict, there was one thing that most of the customers could agree on.
You know, there's too much road rage in LA already. Don't need it over a 73-cent burger.
For Cougar News, I'm Bobby Block.
So I know that was a little low audio-wise. I apologize for that. Hopefully you can turn that up on your computer, but really nice shooting, really nice storytelling from Bobby on just a day where they were offering cheap burgers at Tommy's and it turned into a news story. So again, hopefully if you get an opportunity to kind of watch that and turn the volume up, you'll see it wasn't Bobby's audio was low, it was just the way it was playing out of this computer. But in any event, take a look at that because that's a really good example of a story that sort of has it all, right? So let's jump back to the PowerPoint here real quick. All right, a couple more slides here I want to go through. So key deadlines, every production, all right? So this is going to be for all, this does not include assignment 0. That's actually got its own deadline. That would be March 1st at 7 p.m. in Google Drive. But anytime we have shows, starting with the show on March 16th, we're going to have 6 shows covering like the last probably 10 weeks of school. On Monday, your story, a raw draft of it, needs to be in to Google Drive by 5 p.m. 5 p.m. By 9 p.m., you have to have a final draft in along with your script in Inception. We're going to be showing that to you next week. That'll be the 23rd. I'm sorry, not the 23rd. That'll be March 2nd. We're going to be showing you how to use Inception. We're going to be going through that like a fine-tooth comb. But script and package need to be in always by 9 p.m. If you are late, it will not be in the show. You will lose points. All right. Deadlines are critical in this industry, as in any content creation field. Tuesday, the producing team, which will consist of Cade, Jeremy, and then usually 2 or 3 of you from both classes, will come in. You guys will build and finalize the running order, which is the running. We're going to talk about producing next week, so you understand what that means. You'll do everything from tweaking intros, meaning the introductions that you write for your own story that the anchor reads, your graphics, your open, your teases, all this stuff will be, readily explained next week. Please remember, when you're writing your stories, that you are writing conversational style, meaning you're writing for the ear, right? So you basically have to keep it simple. You have one opportunity generally to get whatever point you're trying to get across. It's not like an article on a web where if someone's confused, they can just look at it and stare at it and go back and look at it again. People generally don't do that with video, so you have to be very clear and concise, okay? You have to develop a mental picture of your audience. I always tell people before you sit down to write, whether it's a VO or a package or any kind of broadcast script for that matter, who are you talking to? Who is it that you think you're talking to? So I always think that I'm writing for a good friend, my wife, right? And so it doesn't matter whether I'm writing a news story, entertainment, sports. I am trying to write for someone as, straightforward and as broad as possible, right? Write news copy as close to one-on-one conversation as possible. Remember, you are trying to tell someone a story that you don't have to repeat yourself. So think about maybe something you've done exciting over the weekend and you go, hey, you go to your brother, oh my gosh, you're not gonna believe what I just did. And you start to get into this long convoluted story about what you just did this weekend. Well, that's gonna eventually lose the person you're talking to. They're gonna look at you and go, yeah, I'm kind of losing track of how your weekend went. So think about telling it in a much more abbreviated, clear and concise manner. You have to make educated assumptions. If you throw out a term, will this person know it? If you throw out a name, will this person know it? So if you're doing a story where you're referring to, say, President Biden, everyone knows who the president is. But if you are throwing out like the term of a city in Ukraine, for example, or somewhere across the country because you're doing a story on COVID, maybe it's better to mention the country, but not the actual city. So you can say, maybe we're doing a story with someone here that's got relatives in Kiev, Ukraine. You could say, Sally's cousin lives in the western part of Ukraine, and she is deeply concerned, as opposed to saying, Sally's cousin lives in whatever, name the town in Ukraine. No one knows where that is except for people in Ukraine. So just like I said, try to dumb it down a little bit, simplify it. And of course, if you are using fancy terminology, you're going to lose your audience. So keep it simple, stupid, as they say, KISS. Write like you talk, use contractions, okay? I'm going to work now. That's how we talk. We don't say, I'm going to work now. Read your script aloud. I do this every time I write a script at ABC. Every single time I read my script aloud. Why do I do that? Because if I start to read it out loud and stumble over myself, then I know I've not written that well. Okay, let the ear be the judge of what you've written. If you have too much information in one sentence, you're going to struggle to get that sentence out conversationally. You're going to run out of breath. So avoid information overload. Okay, so just like the script should be the basics of who, what, why, where, when, and how, the sentences should be also pared down so it's kind of one idea, one sentence. I think that's the best way to do it. Write for breathing. Write so that you can, whoever's writing or reading your script, or if you're reading your script, that you don't have to rush through it, right? You want to leave room for breathing, okay? So natural pauses, okay? Keep in mind how much you can easily say in one sentence or one breath. Keep the sentence simple with one idea to a sentence. Like try to find natural points where you can pause or just slightly pause so it sounds natural. Takes a lot more time to write short than to write long, but in the end, your words and style will be sharper. Eliminate internal phrases and clauses. For example, Dave Brill, who is 6'4" and has 3 kids, is currently giving a lecture. Well, it should be Dave Brill is currently giving a lecture. Second sentence, the professor of 3 or the father of 3, blah, 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 right? So separate that out. Stay away, so separate subject and verb. Stay away from big words, okay? This is not an English essay. This is a conversational script. Last but not least, when you think of verb terminology or verbs in general, you want to use active voice versus passive voice. Active, 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 right? You do the same thing when you're writing in by the way, in inverted pyramid in MEA 110 or 210, very much we're an active voice society, right? What is the difference? He hit the building. That's active voice. Passive voice, the building was hit by him. So if you hear that and you hear the term, you hear the word by, it means preposition, right? So if your sentence has a preposition, it is in passive voice, right? So active voice verbs are direct. Passive voice verbs weaken the impact of the verb. You want to be direct as you write. That's how we talk conversationally. We don't talk like a like a passive voice sentence. because it makes the sentence stiff and formal. By the way, just as a review, I think we might have done this last week. Future tense is first. Future tense verbs are first. Present tense is your next order of verb tense. Then it's present perfect and then past. So again, a lot of things in news are in past tense, but always search out the reason why they can be present or future. Okay. So if you have any questions on any of this, please let me know. Again, there is going to be a quiz on what I just talked about. So hopefully you've watched this video, and then when you feel like you're ready to go ahead and click on the quiz. And I just want to wish you luck on the quiz, and obviously good luck on putting together assignment number 0 and all the packages going forward. We will see you soon.